Hello and welcome to this edition of Edtech Mondays Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Edtech Mondays is a series of conversations that leverage on the power of technology to bring together different policymakers or stakeholders to have conversations around how we can input technology in our education systems to increase access to education around the continent, making it of good quality but also relevant on the continent. And on this edition, we are going to be continuing our Emerging Technologies in EdTech series. This time, we delve into artificial intelligence in education. AI is transforming and reshaping the global economy, and the use of artificial intelligence in education has seen an increase in recent years. The rapid development of this new technology is having a major impact on education. Though a relatively new concept to education, AI is already prevalent in many learning contexts. Policymakers and educators have entered uncharted territory that raises fundamental questions on how the future of learning will interact with AI. Rwanda is the first country on the continent to have a national artificial intelligence policy in what it describes as a roadmap to harness the benefits of AI and mitigate its risks. In the policy document, Rwanda's school curricula shall adapt for the age of AI, data, and digital technologies, with the government investing in creating a teacher corps to provide the support and training to young learners in AI and data-related subjects. And so we're asking, how can artificial intelligence be applied in education in the African context? What are the necessary implementation frameworks? Our panelists on this edition are Christine Nizamuyitira, who is joining us online, and she is a scholar in residence at the Carnegie Mellon University. In studio with us, we have Matthew Grolnick, who is the lead Future of Work at the Mastercard Foundation. Thank you for joining us. And we also have Mutembe Kariuki, who is the CEO and co-founder of FastTagger. Thank you so much for joining us. And so a conversation around AI. I mean, everybody would be saying AI. Why AI in education? But why not? So let's start with the basics. What is artificial intelligence in the education context? But also, how exactly do we apply it in our education systems? Mutembe.
For me, I'm the child of teachers. So whenever I think about education, I always think about, seeing my parents, my mom bringing a lot of papers to mark at home all the time. And so whenever I think of AI, and when you think about what AI is, it's literally just, you think about when we built the Gutenberg process, we were able to take part of, what we used to have to talk to each and every person and give them our ideas and put them on paper. So AI is literally us building a tool that is able to now take the way we think, and now we can be able to get other people to engage with this. So teaching machines to think and do the same things that humans do, that is what AI is. And if I think about my mom, it's literally, taking the work that she used to do, marking papers like at the end of the term for so many students, and getting the marking scheme, teaching the machine how to identify the correct answers, and then marking. So that's a practical way I would be able to explain AI, is like teaching something that humans do, and then a boring task, in fact, and then getting machines to help us as a tool. That's what AI is.
Right. Matthew, would you like to chime in on this one?
Right now, I think that what we're doing is we're applying artificial intelligence to the current classroom. So that could be to help teachers. That could be to help students to learn new things. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing, and everybody's experimenting with that. But I think then also, if we look in kind of the long term and what it could be and what it has the potential to be, I think that's where we get some really interesting ideas. And one of the things that maybe we could talk about at some point would be the idea of kind of individualized and personalized education for everyone.
Right. Individualized and personalized. Christine, you want to take us through what do you think AI is and how it's being applied in education?
AI basically is the branch of computer science when we speak of technology generally.
Yes.
And it's in artificial intelligence. And we know that intelligence, human beings have the best intelligence capability. AI will be simulating that intelligence into a machine or a computer. And this machine and computer can perform the same tasks as a human being is supposed to do. Mutembe said about auto-grading. which is an automated grading of assignments, for instance, exams, and many, many other things. So when AI is applied to education specifically, this is the integration of AI tools or capability into pedagogy or daily activity of teaching and learning. So that's how I understand AI.
And I'm thinking that you have interacted with AI in your day-to-day work as a scholar in residence at CMU. Maybe you want to share some of those use cases with us.
One is the auto-grading tools that are integrated into our LMS, the learning management system itself. And secondly, the plagiarism checking. This is like trying to avoid copying from different places, because, during learning must be very honest, so that integrity part of academic is, assured. So those are two. I think thirdly, I can speak also about data analytics, seeing the progress of students and being able to, advise accordingly.
And so when you talk about data analytics, I get the feeling that you can't talk about AI without talking about data. But also I like to think that AI comes in different forms. There's the generative AI, and then there's the adaptive AI. But how exactly can we make it make sense for us in the education system on the African continent, knowing that this is uncharted territory, Matthew?
We're in a state where a new technology has come out and it's very disruptive. So we're in this kind of in-between state where everyone's kind of grappling with what is this technology and what does it do? First of all, I think nobody fully knows the answers right now. I think there is going to be this period of experimentation. The way that I see it is that AI is coming. And I think that's one of my key messages. AI is coming. And so, there's kind of some people that react to it and say, well, wow, this is scary. I don't know how to deal with this. Let's step back. Let's try and slow this down. Let's try and ban this. And I just think, it's not something that we're going to be able to contain. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. It's coming. And so therefore, I think we need to kind of lean into it and say, great, this is coming. How do we make sure that we maximize the benefits for the African continent? And how do we address and be aware of the risks?
Mtembe, do you want to tell us, because, you talked about having an understanding of AI as being the thing that moves things away from being too much of paperwork and then gives them some auto-generative way of functioning. But, when you look into how exactly this is happening, would you say that this is one of the benefits of AI? What other benefits can we look into?
I think there are a lot of benefits when we are thinking about AI. And for example, myself, I was 12 years old here in Kenya, and that's the first time I ever interacted with what you could say is an AI, because the first chatbot or the precursors to ChatGPT was one called Eliza, which was actually built in the 1960s at MIT. So now we've come a long way from like one of the first conferences in the 1950s. I think it was Dartmouth, where they were talking about AI. So it's been with us. And even coming here, I was using, Google Maps. You're using some sort of machine learning for that. And so if we fast forward to like right now, and Matthew alluded to it, of like individualized learning. So for example, as a startup, we're part of like NVIDIA, which is one of the big companies in AI right now. And they have a product, called Riva, where it's about, automatic speech recognition. And one of the tools that has been developed is like, you have all these children, for example, with special needs who even normally who, children want to learn how to read. So now this one is you talk to a machine or a computer, and then it's able to pick out whether you're actually speaking the right way. It can pick out, for example, if you're having learning disabilities. So if we could actually be able to have this across the continent, already we have a challenge with the amount of teacher to student ratio. In Kenya right now, my former school, you're having over 100 people in a class, right? If you can't have individualized attention. So if you're supposed to teach the basis of literacy, which is a reading, then you can actually use tools such as automatic speech recognition and enable people to engage with the machine and have very individualized learning, whether it's in Swahili or English or even our native languages. So I think that's also a big opportunity.
Right. And I know that, some might say it's not too early to start this, but do you think we're ready to integrate AI into our education systems? I know that there are some that have already done so, but are we ready to take it mainstream and say, look, this is it. It's here. It's the future, and the future is now. So we're trying to get this into the global scale and trying to participate as global citizens. Are we ready for that here on the African continent, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're at a state where we need to start looking into it. Are we ready to start rolling this out to everyone? No, I mean, we're not. But we need to start learning about it. We need to start experimenting with it. But beyond that, there are some significant hurdles I think we need to get over before we really can realize this individualized learning for everyone. Mm-hmm. One, of course, is access. Smart, you need a device oftentimes in order to do this. Smartphones, you need connectivity. Although, as we're going forward, you may not need connectivity. You may be able to actually run it directly on your device without connectivity. So that's coming. So that's one thing, is access. But to be honest, the other one, another big one, is mindsets. And this is for a lot of people. This is for, when you have a system that's been going, if you look at the current form of education, it's been going for hundreds of years. So to try and shift from that, to try and take that to a new direction is very difficult. And that is both teachers. Teachers, need to be able to experiment, but it's also parents. And actually, oftentimes schools and governments are reacting to the needs of the parents. And parents are saying, listen, I went through this old system. It worked for me, or at least I'm very familiar with it. I'm comfortable with it. Do you really want to change that for my child? I don't know. So that would be another thing. And then the last one, of course, is policy. We just need to make sure that there's room for experimentation without kind of going off the rails.
Right. I like the part about policy because it does speak into the case for Rwanda, because now I think Rwanda being the first country to put out a national policy on AI, I think that does speak to how much more we can learn from each other. Christine, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Are we ready for AI in our education systems in Africa? And also, how exactly do you think we should go about it if we are ready for it?
I think we are ready for AI in education in Africa for some of the subjects and not for others. So I start from some of the subjects or courses that we can exploit AI, we can leverage AI capabilities to learn more. So if we speak of learning technology, this is something very universal. And using AI to learn how to code, for instance, how to do some mathematical equations, things like that. I think that's not going to harm any country as far as the teaching and learning is concerned. But when it comes to some of the contextualized courses, we need to be very careful because AI is based on data, and this contextualized data is trained from the context, and it is used as an AI tool in the same context. So if we take usually global AI tools, they are trained from, for instance, Western culture, Asian culture, and when you bring in Africa, this will bring some issues because it's like you are comparing two different features of persons, maybe eyes are not same, things like that. So we have to be careful while adopting AI tools and consider the context as far as the courses to be learned are concerned.
Right. One of the things that I find a little bit challenging, and maybe this is also a risk in disguise, is just the level of adaptability when it comes to our education systems, all the way from the leaders down to the implementers. Because when we talk about adaptation of technology, you could even see before the pandemic, adaptation of technology in our education systems was at different bases, fragmented across the continent. And then now we have to contend with emerging technologies like big data and now artificial intelligence. Do you think that we need to get to a point where we make it mandatory that at a certain level where decisions are being made, we need to make sure that there's someone with the right knowledge to make the right decisions for our leaders or with our leaders so they're able to make the right decisions? around emerging technologies like AI. I want to hear from you as well.
I believe a lot of times technology, goes way ahead of even policy. It's something that, and even if you think about even education, it's not always in the classroom. So already a lot of young people are using AI, to learn and to do math problems. And I think right now, in Kenya, for example, there was the government that set up like the committee to review the ICT standards and regulations in Kenya. And I believe they have actually an emerging technologies component of that. And, within the ecosystem, our startups and others, we're really engaging with them and trying to, share our knowledge, because we are deep in the technology. So I think this collaboration, and if you look at Kenya particularly, I think even way before, you had Dr. Bitang and Demo, come up with like the artificial intelligence and, distributed ledger commission, and they actually gave a lot of ideas. I think it's really important for all these bodies to come together, whether it's academia, private sector, the government, to actually chart a way forward and make it actually easier for us to be able to implement, the benefits of these emerging technologies. So I completely agree with you. There needs to be more engagement, but also a lot of support for actually the startups, because there are actually a lot of startups who are actually building tools. There's the Kenya Corpus project that's actually trying to build some of these speech capabilities, NLP. And then there's also a lot of, young startups who are actually building some of the solutions that we're really implementing. So I think this collaboration is really important.
Right. I like the part around collaboration and just seeing how startups are starting to, lead the way. But then there's also the part where practice is ahead of policy. And how do we go about those kinds of challenges where we are seeing innovators coming up with solutions that our education systems are not ready for? How do we go about those kinds of emerging challenges?
I want to just echo this point. I think in life, when you come across something that is unfamiliar and unknown, the first reaction is, this is scary. I'm going to move away from it. And I think we've come to a point where our leaders need to be familiar with this, need to experiment and have some firsthand knowledge of this, because that's what's going to get them engaged and get them to say, okay, yes, there may be some risks, but there are some benefits. And I think we need to really focus on even explore and understand the benefits. And I'd love to just kind of quickly run through kind of some of what I think that is.
Yeah.
We talked about individualized education. In a society, we've kind of made a choice with our education system that we, in Kenya, in Africa, across the world, we think that education for all is a really important thing. And I think that's a great thing, but there's trade-offs here. Mm-hmm. And the trade-off is that, as Mutsembe alluded to earlier, when you're doing education for all, that means you have large classrooms. That means that not every teacher knows, every kid intimately and can work with them on a one-on-one basis. Yeah. And that's the trade-off that we made. And I think, kind of how I see it is that AI, what it does is it actually allows us to give that individualized learning to each person. And I'll say that kind of in three particular areas. Number one is in content. So it can understand what each student is interested in and how it learns, and kind of be able to feed the content that is individualized to each person. That's number one. Yeah. Number two is pedagogy, or just basically how we teach. One person may be very visual, another person may be very active. Another person may need to have kind of like a conversation or a debate in order to learn something. And the AI can do that. And then the third, which I think is the most interesting, is basically kind of this individualization of time and location. Mm-hmm. So of course, yes, somebody can, learn if they have other obligations, they can go learn from home at a different time. But where I think this, I talked about timelines before. If you look kind of more into the like the distant future, or maybe a couple, 5-10 years, you can imagine where people learn oftentimes when they're out there doing things, as opposed to just being in the classroom and learning theoretically. If I'm learning to negotiate, well, it's not about reading something or practicing on a screen or a book. It's about being in the market and going and negotiating for vegetables. Yeah. And so you can imagine a future where you almost have a device with you that is basically accompanying you around, or having this one-on-one tutor accompanying you around, that's listening to your conversations and then be able to give you that individual feedback in real time if you want. And so it kind of takes education out into the world rather than just in the classroom. So right. Yeah, those are some of the benefits. I think it's just important to keep those in mind so we can then think about what it means for the risks.
I mean, I like the part where you say that it enables personalized learning, because I think that there is where one of our challenges are, because when we look at education exclusion around the African continent and seeing how AI would be able to play a role in making sure that there's a bit more inclusion, I think that really is something we need to put into consideration. But, how are you at the foundation collating information based on AI and using that to inform decision making?
MasterCard Foundation, our goal is to get 30 million young people into what we call dignified and fulfilling work by 2030. And the word work is really important, and we haven't gotten to this part of the conversation yet, but we need to understand work. And, we have somewhat of an idea of what work means today, but when you have these disruptive technologies, that changes the way that we potentially work. It changes the types of tasks that an individual will do in the future, and maybe says, other tasks that we're doing today, maybe a computer or AI will do. So first of all, it's us just really trying to get an idea of, number one, what do those jobs look like in the future? Which tasks are going to be done by computers and which tasks will be done by humans? From there, understanding what are those skills that people need, not just today, because we work with young people, we work with people that are in school today. So they're going to be, some of them will be entering the workforce in 10 years. They'll be hitting their stride in 20 years. So we want to prepare them for that future. So what are the tasks that they need to do in order to be successful?
Yeah.
And then how do we work backwards from there to say, okay, great, let's make sure that we're stimulating those parts of the economy that we think will be important in the future. And how do we work backwards from that to say, how do we, when we think about education and preparing young people, what are those skills? How do we prepare them for those skills? Right?
Are we able to delve into what exactly that looks like based on the information that you currently have? What is that looking like for us in terms of the curricula, in terms of the future of work, or the jobs that will be relevant, say, in 5 to 10 years from now? How is that looking like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. And, I'll say it's something we can study, we can look into, but nobody knows for sure.
Yeah.
So we're all just kind of doing our best here. But yeah, one of the things that we see is that kind of the, cognitive jobs, the jobs where people are working in the knowledge economy, often those types of jobs will be really enhanced by AI. It's something where, somebody's going to continue to do it, but an AI will kind of act either as, you could say, an intern or a thought partner for them. Jobs that are oftentimes very manual, plumbing, electrician, those similarly actually probably won't be as affected by AI.
Right.
Whereas some of the jobs that are very repetitive and maybe, more cognitive, you can do it online and it's repetitive, those ones are the ones that are going to have a harder time and are going to have to shift a lot. So that's just one kind of focus of what we see.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I'll say is that one thing that we think, and again, we're still doing our homework on this, we're still learning as well, is that what we kind of deem as hard skills, like the technical skills, they'll always be important, but they're going to be turning over very fast. It used to be if you learned a technical skill, that could be good for 20 years.
Yeah.
But now it's like if you learn a technical skill, that might be good for 2 years or 5 years or 3 years. And so you're going to have to continue to have this process of continual learning for technical skills. But then on the other hand, the soft skills, the interacting with people, grit, self-management, and even kind of like abstract problem solving are going to be these continual skills that we think will always kind of, or at least for the foreseeable future, be quite important. So yeah, that's kind of one of the ways that we're seeing it.
All right. And if you go back to the national policy by Rwanda on AI, one of the things that they're looking at or strategizing on is just to see how AI is going to be able to inform, say, their investment in STEM or STEM subjects in their education system. And so there's a lot to think about there. Christine, in terms of inclusion and equity, what role do you see AI playing?
AI may help in education to teach all learners, regardless different impairments that they may be having. For instance, while in live mode, you translate sign language from people with a vision impairment, one teacher may be teaching person with vision impairment and without. For the hearing impairment, teacher may be teaching learners who can see but can't hear, while learners are following live translation of sign language, for instance. And the sign language translation is done by using AI. Same for learners with visual impairment. They have different AI tools that support them to learn or to use, to get understanding of what is happening in the environment. So if teachers are able to teach different learners in the same school, the same classroom, that's a great benefit, I think, as far as inclusion is concerned. Basically, for equity, it's the same. It's you raise up the learners to the same level, regardless any impairment that they may present.
Speaking of learners with disability, I think that it is at that point that there is also a risk, because you don't know how much of going into AI is going to be risky on the learner's part. And also making sure that information is secure, because AI, while it might seem like it is automated information, there is a human behind every AI decision. So how do we make sure that we're taking care, we're safeguarding information and making sure that we're still at the same time giving the right information to the consumers of AI-generated solutions? How do we make sure that there is an intersection, a very safe intersection between giving the service, but at the same time safeguarding? How do we make sure of that?
That's a really good question, Doreen. And I think right now, a lot of the conversation is how do you do responsible, ethical AI, right? How do we have like secure AI that actually, as Matthew also alluded, that runs on device and you're not sharing your data with people who should not have access to this data. And especially when you're coming to like working with young people, with children, you also want to additionally make sure that, they stay safe. And even at first, I think that's, even what we say is what we do. We'll secure, connectivity, independent AI on edge devices. Because if you're thinking about Africa, there's almost 800 million people who have actually never even used the internet, right? And so that's already a digital divide that has already happened. So when we're thinking actually of going out to those people, currently there's, within the US, there's, the National Institute of, Standards and Technology that has come up with a very, robust risk framework that, a lot of people around the world are looking at that. There's also at the Bletchley Park conference last year on actually responsible AI. There's a lot of conversations that happen there. The EU Act has just come out around AI, which also borrows from Japan and then the different, color codes about what you should think about. And I think all this, comes back to when you're thinking about any innovator, any policy that is coming up to build, to monitor, AI technology, especially with people who, young people who have, learning disabilities. But I'd also like to mention that, when we're thinking about AI, even in the terms of like future work, the idea is that, there's a quote that's being said that, it's AI won't take your job, but the person who learns how to use AI really well is probably the one who will take your job. So when we think about it that way, we realize that actually it's really beneficial in terms of, I've been talking to, Rotaractors and other young people who are thinking, oh, how will my career in future be affected? And the idea is like, the more actually you get to learn how to increase the efficiency of and productivity using the tools, the better you'll be. If you're talking about education already in terms of like the math Olympiads, right? That happen, like, this top level students who study hard, math questions, already AI is performing at the top level. So imagine you're getting an expert. Think about, going back to Africa back in the day, you used to sit down in front of a wise man, and listen to them, all their experiences. But now you're having personalized an Olympiad level mathematical tutor, teaching someone how to, catch up with maths. Right. I think Portion Law, who's like has been the coach of the US Olympiad, he's saying like, actually with math, it's no longer with AI that we should be teaching children how to craft problems. We should actually be teaching children how to assess problems, because they should reach that level where they are actually able to look at the problem and assess how it should be broken down, and no longer just, writing it again as into it here in Kenya.
Right. I like that. Matthew, I'm sure you have more that you'd like to add onto this one, because where we're talking about ethics, but at the same time, the intersection of making sure we give as much information, that there is where I think we need to be clear on what our limits are and how far we can go with it?
It's almost a little bit of a two-sided problem. And I say that because on one hand, we want to protect individuals. We want to make sure that, if people are collecting information on them, that is kept safe, that is not used for harm. We definitely want to do that. And I think that, what we need there is transparency. What is being collected? How is it being used? And, perhaps there's regulation around that is needed. The other side of this, though, is that we also need African data. In order for Africa to really exploit, let me say, the benefits of AI, we need homegrown solutions.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we need African data. We need AI to understand African languages. We need it to have information on the societies that we live in, because that's what's going to be the backbone of entrepreneurs,
right,
to be able to build the solutions that are actually going to be tailor-made for the African continent, rather than just kind of being a user of whatever technology is made elsewhere.
So we need to really strategize and put in place different ways in which we can deploy this or deploy AI in our education systems. But there's something that you raised that I think maybe we need to be clear about. Is AI going to replace teachers, and how can instructors as well adapt to it? Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's going to replace teachers, but I do think it'll change the role of teachers.
Yeah.
Right now, kind of in a more traditional education setting, the teacher is viewed as the kind of holder of information that's going to depart that information on the students or the pupils. And I think that what we're finding is that actually there's other ways of having students understand and learn that information, whether that's AI, whether that's other types of technologies. But I think that the role of the teacher then becomes to kind of two things. Number one is to curate experiences, because there's things that you can learn from reading in textbook, but there's things that you have to learn by doing. And again, that goes back to the soft skills oftentimes. So that's number one. And number two, I think it's a little bit of like a coach, acting as a coach, being able to kind of come alongside someone, have those conversations about where they're going in their life and what's going on, and also kind of acting as that social, emotional person that they can lean on a bit. So I think it changes the role of teachers in that way.
I know you have something to add, but I want to hear from Christine as well. Christine, what do you think? As a scholar in residence at CMU, do you think your job is at stake with AI now coming into place?
It's still secured. So I think AI actually is, to me, an anti-overstretching instructors or teachers, if I may say. For teachers who really want know how to use it, who can learn how to use it, I think AI tool can help to really reduce the workload to me. So I'm very positive about that. And I want to add on what Matthew said, that just the regulation must be in place, policies and regulations, so that AI is used responsibly and the right data has been used. Everything is contextualized if need be.
Everything is contextualized. Mutembe, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just think back to my mom, right?
Yeah.
And also my dad has also been a teacher. He was on the technical side, and my mother was like on the languages side. And
right,
the thing
is this at the foundational level or somewhere?
No, this is literally, my parents, like when I was like,
right,
used to teach like technical education at college, and my mother in a high school, right?
Wow.
And the thing is, for me, I grew up amongst teachers and seeing just how much they were overworked. Like, marking those papers, and you see someone, all night, like just trying to figure out how to mark those papers. Or just think about this individual student who like needed like remedial classes, and you sit down with them and trying to get them to, catch up in math or in English to be able to present properly. But now, if you look at that form and like look at, for example, Finland or Japan, and how, teachers are super, super respected, right? And, you think about how now they would be able to like really break out and really think, as Matthew was mentioning, is like really curate those experiences for the young people. And I think what we are getting to right now is that finally teachers are going to actually be elevated to the level where they need to be like almost like mentors and coaches, but actually able to guide us through life. And now technology takes up the rest of the part, which is like a lot of those repetitive tasks that they had to do all the time that most of them actually didn't like doing all that time. And I think we are really creating a new paradigm with how AI can actually impact education.
Right. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I just have one question for all of us. What would we want the African education system to look like, aided by artificial intelligence? Christine, I'll start with you in this one.
As a continent, we seem to be a little bit lagging behind as far as AI tools are concerned, basically in almost all the field, specifically in education. And we know that this is something that can boost our basically quality education, since having a lot of and diverse information for learning, that's what usually improves the quality of education. So I believe that if the continent put in place the policy and the way of collecting data from the continent itself and put control on the development and production of AI tools that are being developed on the continent or in the context of the continent, this shall boost our education.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. Tembe?
So the CEO of NVIDIA, which is somehow becoming one of the most successful companies in this age, Jensen Huang, he said something very interesting recently. He said that AI is actually embedding the culture of the society that is building it and enabling people to now actually experience that a bit more. And he talked about something called sovereignty of AI. And I think one of the things when I think about what education is, it's supposed to be like training the mind to really, and building an individual who's a good citizen and who can actually fulfill their potential. And I think this is what AI and education contextualized to, like the data, as Matthew was saying, of the countries in the languages, and giving the best world-class professionals education to an individual. And I think that is what is really going to transform Africa and get our young people and all of us to really contribute to the rest of civilization by actually bringing out the best potential in every young African.
During our last conversation on this edition, where we talked big data, there was so much going on around how we have a lot of data that we don't really utilize. And this data is sitting somewhere waiting for someone to unpack it and make informed decisions. But this is not happening at the higher level. And so there's a lot of unutilized data. But as we move forward with these conversations on emerging technologies and AI being at the top of it and data being the energy that fuels AI, what do you see the future of Africa looking like in education where AI is concerned?
I really stick to the idea of inclusion. And I fundamentally think that AI is an inclusive technology. And I think it's interesting because where we are right now, it doesn't feel like that, because it feels like AI doesn't address African needs. AI doesn't, understand what's going on the African continent.
Yeah.
But I think as we get that data and as we fix this, it actually becomes a very inclusive society, similar because it understands our individual societies and then gives us individualized learning. Eventually, we're going to be able to have education which addresses the individual needs of each student, whether that is a girl who hasn't had certain advantages in her life, whether that's a refugee and being able to teach towards that, whether that's a person with disabilities. I mean, these are the things that I think AI will be able to actually do and provide that individualized learning. So I think it's very inclusive. So the inclusion piece, and then also what Mutembe said is about kind of building world-class, yet well-rounded people from the African continent that can kind of lead the societies.
Thank you for that. And now let's take a look, or let's take a listen into some of the views of some of our EdTech developers around Africa who are developing solutions with an AI aspect to them and how they are speaking to their targeted audiences.
Across Africa, young minds are willing to thrive, but traditional learning models, which dictate that all students are taught at the same speed, using the same resources and the same manner, are holding them back, and these models have failed. Literacy and numeracy rates in Kenya are on the decline, with less than a third of students in grade 3 able to attain mastery in grade 2 literacy and numeracy rates. We're changing this narrative at Angaza Elimu, as we believe that every student is unique and deserves their own learning path. And through Kalamu, our AI-powered e-learning platform, We're personalizing the learning experience for students and amplifying their engagement with teachers. The platform is powered by adaptive models, which are able to diagnose what is the student ability, where they're struggling in and where they're progressing in, and it's able to recommend learning resources to power that, supercharge their learning experience. Beyond that, we've leveraged generative AI models to really generate assessments and automatic grading, and also deliver teacher intervention guides to support teaching at the right level, to support how teaching and instruction happens in and out of the classroom. We strongly believe that AI has just taken off in the support of education, and through the right policies like supporting continuous teacher professional development, we are able to see an increase of the cultural change of behavior in terms of the adoption of these technologies in the classroom, and support how teachers can be able to leverage these resources that are in their hands to increase and change the learning outcomes for better. Our work is supported through different partnerships, and one of our flagship partnerships is through AI for Education by FAMP Inc., where we're really generating and using their resources and their models and collaborating with them to see how we can be able to ensure that these models are able to learn from localized content to deliver accurate generation of learning resources and assessments to really support the growing curriculums.
And with that conversation that we just had on artificial intelligence in education, we can almost tell that there are certain aspects that need to be worked out. And one of them is policy and strategy implementation. That there is where the core of this conversation focused. And with that, we can now say that we will be able to take care of other areas such as inclusion, where we are looking at the underserved communities and also those who do not have access to affordable education on the continent. The benefits of AI are immense, but with it comes risks, and those need to be mitigated, or we need to be averse to some of those risks that come alongside AI in education. Thank you all so much for joining us on this edition, and to our panelists, Christine Niza-Wiritida, who is the scholar in residence at Carnegie Mellon University based in Rwanda. We also had Matthew Grolnick, who is the lead future of work at the MasterCard Foundation, and Mutembe Kariuki, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder Fastager here in Kenya. Thank you all so much for joining us on this edition. Until the next one, please remember you can always email us on edtechmondays@mastercardfdn.org, and you can reach us on our social media platforms. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.